Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'm chatting with Scott Berdahl from Snowline Gold Corp. So Snowline is one of the few companies in the junior markets here in Canada that have had success over the last year. We've had multiple people in our YouTube comments ask us to do this interview. And in addition to that, some of the more sophisticated investors I know have told me that Snowline is one of their favorite companies. I also find Scott's story really fascinating because he started out as a kid in the Yukon whose dad would take him out and show him how to prospect, to somebody who's now running one of the more successful gold stocks in Canada. So in this interview, we get into the story of Snowline, but we also talk some of the macro events that are happening right now, and we get Scott's thoughts on the gold market and where it could be heading. All right, everybody, enjoy the interview. Scott, welcome to The Dive.
Hey, thanks, Steve.
So recently, gold has been on a little bit of a tear. I know that as we're speaking is a day where some inflation data came out and it's down a little, but for the most part, over the last few months, gold's been doing quite well. What do you think's driving the price of gold right now?
That's a great question. And, I wish that I had some inside scoop on it, but I kind of read the news feeds as much as the next person. And it seems that a lot of that's coming from central bank buying. So that's interesting to see. And I guess that's a result of US policy in terms of Treasury policy over the past, well, really, I think going back as far as 2008 and some of the decisions that were made around then and some of the consequences that have pretty long-term implications. So, it's been kind of playing loose with the US dollar for a long time and the implications of that. And a lot of countries potentially moving away from that as their as a reserve currency, and then recognizing the intrinsic value of gold as a reserve currency that, has held its value for millennia and is a stable base at a time when there is that kind of uncertainty in terms of the global financial order.
So now I know Snowline, which we're going to get into in a few minutes, is one of the handful of names in the Canadian junior markets that's done well over the last, say, year. But there's been a lack of investment in the Canadian junior mining space. What do you think it's going to take in order for us to start to see some of the juniors as a whole pick up more capital flows?
Yeah, I think there could be a number of different catalysts, and the high gold price could be one. If it doesn't even necessarily need to go higher, it could just sustain current levels for a longer time, and you start to see the balance sheets of producers improve and dividends increase, and I think the capital would start to flow in there first, and then come down into the junior space from there. There could also be M&A activity that catalyzes the space, and of course that's where you see some big gains, and not just the big gains that gets people on the outside excited, but then you also have a lot of people with cash in their pockets who are kind of looking for the next thing and have the taste of success in their mouths and want to go and do it again. So a lot of that capital would be recirculated into the space, and it's a fairly small space. So a number of different things could come together, any one of which could start to drive tailwinds. But it's certainly primed for a correction, in my view.
So I got a bit of a theory about the lack of investment in mining in Canada. If we look at the Australian Stock Exchange, it's something we hear about all the time in the capital markets, about how there's a lot more interest in Australia and they're really kicking our butts when it comes to mining investment. But my theory is that a big part of the reason for the lack of investment is just the fact that there's not many mines being built in Canada. Why do you think that we've seen so many few mines go into actual production in Canada over the last, say, 5-10 years?
Well, I think it is just underinvestment in the space, and it's been that way for a long time. Really going back as far as the early '90s or mid '90s, when a lot of majors started to kind of offload their exploration work to the junior markets, and I think that was kind of the first. I don't know if it's a misstep or not, but it was definitely a change in the structure as to how things are done. And that works fine if people are playing the junior markets and people are financing these companies, and they can go out and do the exploration, and producers want to pay for that M&A. But then in this past, really more than a decade now, we've seen very little capital coming into the junior space. And so, you don't build new mines if you don't find them. And so it's been wild. Even we've been fortunate with Snowline to be able to attract capital and to be able to keep going, but to make a discovery like we've made and not to have set off a stampede of companies coming in to stake all around us. We were basically able to, over the course of, we've been in existence 3 years now and kind of building our case out sequentially each year and staking. And we've gotten to a very nice, comfortable land position now, but we never had a time when a whole bunch of other companies are coming in and staking all around us. So we've been able to secure a really strong position out there. But it's, I think that's pretty symptomatic of what's going on more broadly. And it's just been underinvestment in the sector for a long time.
So one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, Scott, is when I go to conferences or I chat with people who I trust in the space and I say, what names are you liking right now? And heck, even in our own YouTube comments, we've had a few requests to have you guys on. Snowline is the name that people have been talking about pretty heavily in 2024. So for our viewers that are new to the story, can you give us a high level overview of the company and what you guys have discovered?
Yeah, so Snowline is a new company. We are very exploration focused, basically greenfield, new ideas. We launched a company 3 years ago based on a long history of prospecting in the Yukon. So our origin is from the prospecting efforts of my dad, Ron Berdahl, and he dragged my brother and me out in the bush up here in the Yukon as little kids, and I stuck around and went on to help us push that portfolio forward and help explore out there. And really, it was those doldrums I mentioned of the past more than a decade of being, even if you find something good, you couldn't sell it to a junior. And so, we just needed another way to move things ahead. So that was why we launched Snowline. We had identified an area, a whole package of prospective properties across the Yukon, but specifically in the eastern Yukon, just northwest of a place called McMillan Pass. It's seen some historical exploration and some really interesting work coming out of there recently. But up to the northwest, there was just a huge area that had not been explored much at all. And so we went in there as prospectors. We optioned out some big pieces of land in the last gold boom called 2010 to 2012. And then these projects started coming back to us, and they came back with great baseline data, really validated a lot of big ideas. And that's what I spent the better part of the last decade shopping around, trying to get these validated ideas back out the door, and couldn't really do that. And so we launched Snowline just to get a drill out there and to test out some of these concepts. And we've had a remarkable success with testing those concepts. So and our most notable discovery at this point is a bulk tonnage gold target called Valley. It's on our Rogue project, which is a 60 by 30 kilometer piece of ground. We have about 3,000 square kilometers total in the Yukon. And a lot of that is in the area, this district that's taking shape around Rogue. Rogue is one of the sub properties within this broader district. And within Rogue, which is a cluster of these intrusions that all seem to have gold anomalism associated with them, we've drilled into one of these called Valley, and we've hit remarkable grades for a bulk tonnage system, just multiple gram per ton over hundreds of meters from surface. And it really just highlighting the underexplored nature. This system is really sticking out of the ground. And it hadn't been staked before. Kilometer scale intrusion, not on any geological map. So we're really just kicking the rocks for the very first time in a region that has a lot of parallels to some of the best gold camps in the world. We're very excited to be doing that. And it's one thing to wave your arms about the parallels, which I did for a long time. It's another thing altogether to drill 554 meters at 2.5 grams from surface. So 2.5 grams gold. So, we're super excited by that. And the way that this system at Valley is holding up, in terms of the consistency, the great metallurgy, and the geometry of it. Even if you're thinking about future mining scenarios, it all just checks the boxes in a very emphatic way for what we were looking for out there.
So you are the founder of Snowline.
Yeah, one of the founders. My dad's not involved in the company as apart from being a shareholder, but certainly a co-founder there. And then we actually had Keith Neumeyer of First Majestic Silver was instrumental in getting the company over the line. He was the one who secured the shell and did a lot of the legwork on the initial financing. So it was great to have him push things or help set things into motion as well.
Yeah, we've had Keith on a bunch of times. So I'm picturing you're a young guy, you're going around, you're trying to raise money in what's probably a challenging gold market, say 10 years ago. Is this kind of where you lean on your dad and say, Dad, how did you raise money? Or did you have mentors that you could go to? What's for anybody out there who's watching this saying, I'm crazy enough to want to be an entrepreneur who is going to go raise money for a mining deal, and they don't have sort of that background that you had thanks to your father. But that's not to say that it wasn't challenging. I'm certain that it was. What was that like? Did you have that network built where you could go out and talk to people, or does this all just basically boil down to merit and then just getting in front of the right person?
Well, I think it's a little of both, where, I didn't set out to build that kind of network specifically, but I'd been active in the industry for quite a while as a prospector, and shaking a lot of trees, trying to push projects ahead, and just maintaining connections with people. And so we had that was how I met Keith initially. I wasn't thinking, okay, here's someone who's going to help put together initial financing for this thing and move things ahead. It was just another interesting person. I think I was probably trying to sell him a silver project or something like that. And then out of those conversations came the kind of broader push that we were doing with the rest of our property portfolio, or the gold focused parts of it anyway. And similarly, I was fortunate to meet Quentin Henney early on, years and years ago. He'd worked with my father on some kind of an exploration play down in the US, and he just pointed him out to me as he was walking by once at PDAC, and he's like, "Yeah, there's a guy who does some really interesting things, really bright geologist." And so I just went and introduced myself, not knowing where I would lead. And then the company that Quentin does a lot of work with or works for, Crescat Capital, they came in as big supporters of our story at an early stage. And it's hard to find groups that, especially in this market, they'd invest in early stage projects. And so that wasn't why I had approached Quentin way back then. Snowline was not even conceived yet, but nonetheless, it was, just maintaining those connections. And, those are just two examples. I think just kind of getting yourself out there into the space and getting a sense of who's doing what, and keeping people informed as to what you're up to. You never know what's going to fall into place. So it was not planned. There was a lot of serendipity and just a lot of pushing, and those connections have really allowed us to do what we've done.
So if we look across all the projects that you have, how much historic drilling has been done on them?
Very little. Like I say, we've got about 3,000 square kilometers, and I'm shooting from the hip here, but we're probably looking at less than 3,000 meters of drilling on all of that. So this is real, true greenfield.
So you're basically just hitting naked holes.
Yeah. Like our first season, we drilled 2 targets. Neither of them had ever been drilled before. That was our Jupiter discovery and orogenic system. Had some really good results there. And then we moved down to Valley at the very end of the season. We were so excited about Jupiter that we almost didn't get the rig down there. But in September, we packed it up and got 4 holes down at Valley, and that rig hasn't left Valley since. So, and we've got a lot of targets, like dozens of targets out there that we've yet to get a drill hole onto. But discoveries like Jupiter and Lake Valley just really showcase that, okay, this is a very fertile metallogenic province. Like, it wants to form gold deposits, especially seeing discoveries made in different styles of mineralization, where one's structurally hosted, high grade mineralization, another one's this big intrusion coming in that just mineralized throughout. We have prospects for other styles of mineralization, gold mineralization as well. And so, yeah, it's pretty exciting to be really first movers, and with that sequential building that I mentioned on, effectively only movers in what looks like it could be an important new gold district.
What does 2024 look like in terms of exploration?
It's going to be a big year for us. We have 3 drills currently parked out at Valley. and we will be turning on 2 of those to keep building out what we found at Valley, both really de-risking the production profile of this high-grade near-surface zone that we found, and also stepping out because we still have a big swath of open mineralization that we can extend in several directions there. So we're still exploring there, and we're pushing ahead and just, like I say, de-risking that high-grade near-surface zone of mineralization. So we have a really solid handle on that. And then we'll be, that'll take up 2 drills, and that third drill will be looking at regional targets. And so I think we have a very exceptional bird in hand with the discovery of Valley. And in exploration, that's worth a heck of a lot more than 2 in the bush. But nonetheless, that proof of concept that I was talking about, I think we would, we don't want to just spread ourselves too thin. We also don't want to just get total tunnel vision on one of the first targets we tried out here and just forget about this entire district that we set up the company to explore. And so we'll have that third drill roving and testing projects, particularly on the Rogue project, which has a target type affinity, like the same kind of target as Valley. And then we'll be looking at likely bringing in a 4th drill. And that'll also be testing out regional targets. And so we'll see how that comes together in between now and the season. But we're just prioritizing those targets now. But we've got a lot of interesting potential Valley analogs out there, and some other targets taking shape as well. So it's going to be a big year. Should be pretty exciting. And behind the scenes, we're working on a lot of the steps that we need to take, not just to explore Valley, but to progress Valley. And we've been doing environmental baseline there since almost our first real discovery holes out there, when we realized, okay, this is an exceptional system. And, this is not just a typical prospect. And so this is going places. And so let's get started now. Like, the timers that we need to do in terms of, like water quality monitoring, for example, and then hydrology measurements and that sort of stuff. What can we do now to see that first pour in a hypothetical future scenario come that much closer to the present? Because you can build value through building out the system, and we have a lot of work to do there, but you can also build value by just reducing the discount of when you're actually seeing those cash flows come in. So we're excited to push on both fronts.
What can you tell us about the cap table in terms of at what prices was the bulk of the money raised, and any significant? We've mentioned Keith, but any significant investors that are worth maybe mentioning when talking about the company's shareholder base?
Yeah, so a lot of we've had a run of financings over the last while where we've been able to use charity flow through in a very effective fashion, and so that's been huge for us in terms of just building in those, call it 40% ish premiums on various deals, but seeing those shares not go to a typical flow through holder who's going to just liquidate at their first chance because they're just buying for the flow through premium, but going through to very strong holders on the back end who are buying Snowline for Snowline. And so we've been fortunate. I mean, we did a raise with the B2 was actually they took the equity stake. And so they currently have a 9.9% shareholding in the company. It's not a typical strategic investment where you have, a board position or a technical committee. We're very happy to have them in. It's essentially as investors, but they also came in for the equity stake with a premium that we were then able to use as back end on a charity flow through deal. And so I think we were trading around 240 or 243 or something at the time, and we raised those at 486, so 100% premium to the share price at the time. And similarly, our last raise, again, with that charity flow through front was, I think, around 750. So, we've been doing very non-dilutive financings, and that's really allowed us to push ahead in an aggressive way. Other big shareholders include Scotia Global Asset Management, formerly known as 1832. They've had some big investments in other companies that have done very well. So we're very happy to be on their radar. Van Eck has picked up a substantial position, and T. Rowe Price, we were pleased to see them come in, pleasantly surprised, I guess you could say, building a strong position through financing and also on the market. So, some of these groups have been able to build fairly big positions despite the general lack of liquidity in the space. And we're definitely not immune to that. But nonetheless, to see these big percentage scale positions just gradually accumulated or fairly quickly accumulated, actually. A year ago, we had almost no institutional investment, effectively no institutional investment. And now we're sitting at north of 16%.
And here we're talking about real institutional investment here. We're not talking about some of the hedge funds that exist that are just going to end up causing a lot of pain down the road. You're bringing in Scotia asset managers is what I'm understanding.
That's right. Yeah. No, we're seeing big, sticky shareholders who understand the value thesis behind Snowline, who are, who see an opportunity here and are aligning themselves accordingly.
Oh, I wanted to ask about the flow through. So one of the common things I hear whenever a company does a large amount of flow through is that it's going to lead to pain down the road because you're going to have to be eating those shares. Do you know the flow through investors who ultimately are holding the stock that you guys raise the money with?
Yeah, and that's why I'm careful to specify that these are charity flow through raises. I agree that flow through brings a lot of indigestion down the road. We've never done a flow through financing, just a straight flow through. Because, then it's just someone, okay, well, I have these, I made a bunch of money this year. I'm a dentist or whatever. And I want to, I'll buy some exploration expenses so that I can write them off against my taxes. And then, okay, company XYZ, sure, I'll take one. And, they don't really care what company they're buying. And so, of course, they're happy to sell and don't really understand what they're buying. But with a charity flow through structure, it's arranged so that, there's a back end that's buying for fundamental value, and the front end is really just they're getting their discount, and then they're donating those shares to charity, and then the charities benefit as well because they're purchased from the back end buyers purchased from the charity. So really, it's a pretty solid win-win-win-win scenario, and it leaves us with so we're basically doing the equivalent of the traditional just financing in terms of how our relationship with those back-end purchasers of the shares. And so you have people who they're not getting the flow through benefits who are holding the shares. So that purchase is taken care, or that sale that can lead to the flow through hangover, that's taken care of on day one, and it's taken care of in a way that gives an extra premium to the company. So yeah, we're I'm a big fan of that technique, and as long as it is the appetite remains out there for that kind of a thing, we're pretty keen to finance exploration that way if we can get these big premiums.
So what can investors look forward to for the remainder of the year in terms of maybe potential catalysts, milestones, if they're just trying to watch the company to evaluate the progress? What are they watching out for?
Yeah, so we have a lot of really interesting regional targets coming to light, and I think that's it's one thing to drill a big discovery hole, of course, but just seeing the general potential that we have out there, and as we turn into the season for 2024, we will be drilling both at Valley and expanding that system out, and pushing ahead, building out our understanding which will eventually lead to a resource estimate, and hopefully not long on the tails of that, some fundamentals of the economics of this thing. And so we're certainly driving in that direction. And the regional exploration story, though, is very exciting. And just again, with what we see at Valley and what that implies for what this province can do, what it can build, and with the number of targets that are coming to light out there, I think that's a key catalyst that could really take this from kind of linear growth to exponential growth if we're able to show that Valley is not alone out there. And so that's a key part of the program this year as well, that regional drilling and watching that come together. And then there are significant de-risking events along the way. We're doing doubling down on our metallurgical understanding of the system. And, for our initial tests were very favorable. We took a bunch of just off-the-shelf conventional techniques, threw it at this mineralization, and on your typical kind of 75 micron grind, 48 hours, had recoveries between 94% and 96% average for 3 different techniques. And so that's not optimized. Let's see what happens. And so So those are very strong recoveries, but building that out and really de-risking and advancing our understanding as we build kind of behind the scenes the fundamental picture here.
All right, well, Scott, thanks so much for hopping on here today. I think you got a really interesting story, and I hope you'll keep coming back on here as the story develops, because seeing companies create shareholder returns is something that, as somebody who's a champion of the junior markets, I love seeing. And I hope you guys continue to have success. And like I said, please keep coming on here and updating our audience as the story unfolds.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate you taking the time and appreciate the invitation. So thank you very much.
All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this interview, please smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Also, let me know what you think in the comments section. Thanks, everybody.